On Christmas Eve in the heart of winter, how far would you go for someone you've never met? Snow was falling in soft, quiet waves, the kind that makes even the busiest cities feel silent. The streets were mostly empty, lit only by flickering holiday lights, and the warmth of home felt far away to anyone standing in that cold. Nathan Hayes wasn't looking for a miracle that night. Truth be told, he hadn't believed in miracles for a long time. 3 years had passed since he lost his wife, Claire, and their unborn son in a tragic accident. Since then, holidays had felt like obligations, empty rituals filled with memories he couldn't escape. He was just grabbing groceries. One quick stop before heading home to microwave dinner and sit in silence. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. Outside the store, by the overflowing trash bins near the alley, Nathan noticed something moving. At first, he thought it was just a stray animal, maybe a cat. But then, he saw the shape of a small figure. A child, digging through garbage bags with thin, trembling fingers. She was maybe 7 or 8. Her clothes were torn and didn't match. Her shoes were soaked through. And her eyes, those eyes didn't belong to a child. They belonged to someone who had seen too much. Nathan approached slowly, careful not to frighten her. "Are you okay?" he asked. The girl froze, clutching a half-eaten sandwich like it was treasure. "I'm just looking for food. I'm not stealing," she whispered, her voice brittle from the cold. Her name was Melody. Melody's story wasn't just marked by loss, it was shaped by silence. The kind of silence that settles in after too many goodbyes, too many unanswered questions, and too many nights spent waiting for someone who never came back. She'd lived with her grandmother since she was 3. Her only real caregiver after her mother vanished and her father was sent to prison. Despite having little, her grandmother gave her everything she could. Warm meals, bedtime stories, a small radio that played gospel music every Sunday morning. It was a fragile kind of stability, but for Melody, it was enough. It was love. That life ended abruptly one winter morning. Her grandmother collapsed while walking her to school, clutching her chest with one hand and Melody's mittened fingers with the other. The ambulance came too late. What followed was a blur. Strangers with clipboards, unfamiliar houses with too many rules, new bedrooms that never felt like hers. The foster system, overburdened and understaffed, shuffled her between homes where she was either forgotten or treated like a problem to manage. Some homes were strict, others neglectful. None were permanent. She learned how to stay small. How to keep quiet, how not to ask for anything. But survival has a cost. Each time she packed her small duffel bag, she packed a little less hope with it. And by the time she ended up digging through trash behind a grocery store on Christmas Eve, she wasn't just looking for food. She was looking for evidence that kindness still existed. She had no idea she was about to find it in the form of a tired, grieving man named Nathan Hayes. Nathan's house hadn't changed in 3 years. The front porch still had Claire's wind chimes, silent from rust. The guest bedroom held unopened boxes with baby clothes that were never worn. And the kitchen table, once meant for noisy family breakfasts, had become a resting place for unopened mail and takeout containers. He lived in that house the way someone floats through grief, not really touching anything, not really moving forward, just existing in a space filled with ghosts. So when Melody stepped inside that night, clutching the warm cocoa he'd handed her with 2 hands too small for such an adult burden, it was like watching someone walk into a memory. She didn't say much, just a quiet thank you as he set up a makeshift bed on the couch. He brought her fresh socks, an oversized hoodie, and one of Claire's old quilts, lavender with little stars sewn into the stitching. Melody pulled it over her head like armor. Nathan noticed her scanning the room, not looking for comfort, but exits. That night, he didn't sleep much. Every creak of the house felt louder, like the building itself was aware it was being used differently now. It wasn't just his shelter anymore. It had to become a haven for someone else. By morning, Nathan was already clearing the spare room. The boxes, baby blankets, stuffed animals, framed ultrasound photos, they all went into the attic. Not because they didn't matter anymore, but because for the first time in 3 years, something else mattered more. He vacuumed carpets that hadn't seen daylight in months. He opened windows, letting fresh air push out the weight of silence. And then he went out and bought a small desk, coloring books, a soft nightlight shaped like a bear. He didn't know if Melody would stay. He didn't even know if he'd be allowed to keep her past the weekend. But something inside him had shifted. This house, for so long stuck in a loop of loss, had a new mission now: to become a home, not just for him, but for her. The decision to take Melody in wasn't just emotional. It was a legal and logistical storm Nathan never saw coming. He assumed, perhaps naively, that his willingness to help would be enough, that showing compassion, offering shelter, food, and stability would speak louder than any document or title. But the reality hit fast. Child Protective Services don't run on feelings. They run on protocols, risk assessments, and red tape. Within 24 hours, Nathan's living room was filled with caseworkers, clipboards, and carefully rehearsed questions. Are you a licensed foster parent? Do you have a history of mental illness or trauma? What are your emergency contacts? Do you understand the legal implications of harboring a minor? He answered them honestly, even when it hurt. Yes, he was still grieving. Yes, his home had been built for a family that never came. No, he had no prior experience with foster care. But what he lacked in credentials, he made up for in clarity. He wasn't offering charity, he was offering commitment. That distinction mattered more than he realized. The caseworker assigned to Melody, Miss Rivera, was stern but not unkind. She had heard too many promises, seen too many temporary heroes fade when things got hard. But she also noticed the way Melody sat close to Nathan on the couch, the way her eyes scanned the room like it was already hers, and how she didn't flinch when he reached for her hand. That was enough to warrant a temporary guardianship order, a short-term solution that allowed Melody to stay with Nathan while the system determined what came next. But it wasn't just about housing. Nathan had to prove he was capable. That meant background checks, interviews, home inspections, training courses, and psychological evaluations. Every drawer in his home was opened. Every word of his past was examined. Even his grief became a subject of scrutiny. Have you truly healed enough to care for someone else? They asked. It was a fair question, and his answer was simple. I don't know, but I know I'm willing to try, every single day. And for now, that would have to be enough. Trust isn't something you hand to someone. It's something you build, slowly, carefully, and often with more setbacks than progress. For Nathan, learning to parent again was like learning a language he'd once spoken fluently, but now only vaguely remembered. And for Melody, trust was something she'd been taught not to believe in. At first, the routines were mechanical. Nathan would make her breakfast, and Melody would thank him, always with a quiet voice and no eye contact. He'd try to talk on the ride to school, and she'd stare out the window. She never asked for anything. She never complained. She just existed, like someone waiting for the floor to fall out from under her again. Then came the small things. A drawing left on the kitchen table. A note slipped into his coat pocket that read, "Thank you for dinner." One day, she left her shoes in the middle of the hallway instead of by the door. A tiny act of carelessness that, to Nathan, felt like progress. She was beginning to feel safe enough to stop tiptoeing. But setbacks came too. One afternoon, he surprised her with a birthday party. Nothing big, just a cake, a few neighbors, and a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Melody." She froze when she walked in. Her smile collapsed. She locked herself in the bathroom and didn't speak to him for 2 days. Later, she finally explained, "I thought you were giving me away. Foster homes throw parties before you move." Nathan's heart sank. That moment, more than any other, showed him just how deep her wounds were, and how carefully he'd have to tread to help her heal. So he adjusted. He asked before planning anything, gave her choices, built predictability, celebrated her opinions, even if they were small. What movie to watch, what cereal to buy, whether or not to wear the red jacket. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ice began to thaw. One night, during a thunderstorm, she knocked on his bedroom door. She didn't say a word. She just held her pillow and stood there. He made space for her on the couch, handed her a blanket, and turned on the lamp. She fell asleep within minutes. He didn't move for hours. Not because he was uncomfortable, but because he knew. He knew how fragile this was, how sacred that trust had become. Healing didn't come in sweeping, cinematic moments. It came in fragments. Quiet victories tucked inside ordinary days. A cup of hot cocoa left on the kitchen table with a sticky note, "For you, Nate." A shoebox full of Melody's drawings, stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, tucked under her bed. The first time she laughed so hard she snorted. The first time Nathan laughed with her. Melody started to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. Her shoulders, once constantly tensed in defense, began to soften. She started sleeping through the night. She stopped checking to make sure her backpack was still by the door. And Nathan? He learned how to be present again. For so long, his life had been lived in grayscale, routine, numb, predictable. Melody brought color back. She challenged him to show up, even when he didn't feel strong. She didn't need a perfect father. She just needed someone who wouldn't give up on her. One night, while cleaning out the attic, they stumbled across Claire's old Christmas ornaments. Melody picked up one with delicate handwriting. Baby's First Christmas, 2019. She looked up at Nathan, eyes wide, not with fear, but with care. "Is it okay if we hang this too?" she asked gently. He hesitated, then nodded, and so they did, together. It was small, but it meant something. Grief was no longer a wall between them. It was something they could face side by side. Nathan didn't fix Melody. Melody didn't fix Nathan. But together, they began to rebuild. And in that rebuilding, they found something neither had expected. A sense of wholeness born not from erasing the past, but from honoring it and moving forward anyway. The courtroom wasn't grand or dramatic, just a modest room with beige walls, worn chairs, and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. But to Nathan and Melody, it might as well have been a cathedral. Melody gripped Nathan's hand tightly as they waited for their turn. Her fingernails were painted with tiny stars, her idea. She'd said, "If today's the day I get a forever dad, I want to look like the night sky." And Nathan? He wore the same navy blue suit he had on the day he married Claire. It didn't fit quite the same anymore, but it felt right to bring a part of that love into this new beginning. When the judge entered, Melody straightened her posture instinctively. Years of bouncing from home to home had taught her to always be on guard around adults in authority. Nathan noticed and gently gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Testimonies were read. Caseworkers gave their assessments. Nathan answered every question with quiet strength. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't perfect, but he was consistent. Present, steady. And when the judge finally looked up from the papers and smiled, Melody's eyes widened. "I believe this is in the best interest of the child," the judge said, voice warm. From this moment forward, Melody Marie Hayes is the legal daughter of Nathan James Hayes. There was no confetti, no fireworks, but Melody's face lit up like sunrise. It wasn't just a name change. It was a declaration. You belong. Nathan bent down and Melody wrapped her arms around his neck. Neither of them said a word. They didn't need to. The silence held everything they'd waited so long to hear. Outside the courthouse, the social worker offered to take a picture. Nathan knelt beside Melody, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. She smiled, not the cautious smile she'd worn that first night, but a full, radiant grin, the kind only a truly safe child can give. Nathan kept that photo in his wallet from that day forward. And Melody? She asked if they could celebrate with pizza, milkshakes, and a movie marathon. No sad stuff, she insisted. Only comedies. They made it a tradition. Adoption Day didn't mark the end of their story. It was the first page of a brand new chapter neither of them saw coming. This wasn't the life Nathan thought he'd have, and Melody never expected to be loved again. But somehow, through pain, through grief, through a chance meeting in the snow, they found each other. Sometimes the family you need finds you when you're not looking. And sometimes, it all starts with a moment you almost walked past. If this story moved you, consider hitting that like button. It helps more people discover stories that matter. Subscribe for more heartwarming tales of second chances, unexpected connections, and the resilience of the human spirit. And if you want to go deeper, check out the videos linked on screen and in the description. Follow us on social media to keep the inspiration going. Until next time, stay kind, stay open, and never underestimate the power of a small act of compassion.